All right, Hayley. First off, two Canadians that travel all the way to Houston just to have a conversation. That's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
Making the trip.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the way.
Okay, kick this off. Tell me something about your past that helps me understand who you are and what you do today.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to get right into it because you and I've had conversations and I just go right deep. So growing up in a small town in southwestern Ontario, I was really struggling with my mental health. Looking back, I can see as young as 9, where I was kind of questioning like death. That was a big one for me, was this idea of death and kind of not wanting to be here. And it wasn't until grade 4 or 5, so that would have been like 10, 11, where I was starting to clue in that was maybe what was called depression. So I was missing school a lot, always sick, probably wasn't sick. Looking back, it was probably anxiety and depression, and it came up in that way, and kind of really struggled internally. And then high school hit, and I just, really, really struggled within myself. On the outside, I looked like I was doing everything. I was competitive figure skating. I went to school, did all those things, but I was in the thick of it for myself. And so what ended up happening was I developed an eating disorder. And back then, and even now, just because of where it was located, there was not many facilities, not many supports around. I'll never forget going to the doctor. And I said, I think I'm struggling with an eating disorder. And I remember him saying, well, your weight's fine, so we'll keep an eye on you. And looking back, that was definitely the catalyst of, okay, I'm not sick enough to be recognized. And so kind of fast forward, my parents would take me all the way to Toronto, which is a good 2-hour drive, probably longer now with all the traffic, just to go to support groups. Ended up getting into treatment, spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital. And when you're finally out of treatment, it's kind of like, there you go. So physically I was okay, but we weren't dealing with this stuff up here. And so I kind of continued on with life. And it wasn't until I was probably in my early 20s that I started to develop what I now know as panic disorder. So I'd get up, start throwing up in the night. Throughout the day, I was just super, super anxious. Didn't really understand it. Doctors were trying to figure out, okay, is it your thyroid? Is it, your stomach? And then they're like, no, you have panic disorder. I'm like, oh, that's what it is? Okay, what do we do to fix this? And so I was really struggling with that. And what ended up happening was I relapsed. And that was probably the worst time for me, which ended up having me, leave where I was living, which was in BC, going to school. I flew back home and I ended up going to treatment, spent a couple of years just really, really working on myself. And I kind of always knew I wanted to work in the field of mental health, especially at a young age. I didn't know at the time what I wanted to be per se, because back then it wasn't a clear-cut road to becoming a therapist. Sure. I just knew I wanted to do something with people, and it wasn't until I was in a support group with a facilitator at the time who then went into private practice, who is now my therapist, that I was like, I want to do what you do. And I want to help. I want to be in the room with people doing what I do. And so that's kind of how I came to be as a therapist and kind of working in the field of mental health.
Describe that panic disorder. Like what does that stem from for people that might be dealing with, I guess along the lines of anxiety?
Yeah.
I'm a bit of an anxious person as well. Just kind of like battled through the things on my own, but I could see like how anxiety could lead very quickly to even worse conditions. Mm-hmm. Like, where does that come from?
So when I look at it, everyone's so different. And so I can only speak from my experience. And looking back, I've always struggled with anxiety. I've always been a worrier. I've always kind of, worst case scenario. But I think when I was in the midst of it, especially with anxiety, I really couldn't go anywhere. And so what kind of happened was, with panic disorder, what I know now from my experience was I would get sick out of nowhere. So I'd either have, it kind of started as like heart palpitations, I couldn't breathe, kind of like panic attack. And then it got to the point where I was getting sick, like throwing up all night, to the point where my parents would have to take me to the hospital. You'd go in there, they're like, did you take anything? I'm like, no, just, I don't know what's wrong. They'd give you a needle of Gravol and send you on your way. And that became so frequent for me that I didn't understand it. It wasn't until I relapsed and was in treatment that they diagnosed me with panic disorder. And I was like, that makes so much sense. But what happens with panic disorder, which is really interesting, is that these panic attacks, you start to create coping mechanisms to not have them happen. So I knew they'd happen at night in my sleep, so I wouldn't go anywhere. So I wouldn't sleep over anywhere.
Right.
Going to a hotel, like coming here to Houston and staying in a hotel by myself would not happen. That was a big one. Going to like the grocery store, that was like a no-no. I would really, really isolate. Going out, it became a time thing for me. I remember that really clearly. It was like, okay, I need to get to bed and be in bed by 10, so I need to be home by 8. So if I was going out for New Year's, I was so worried inside that I needed to get back. So it becomes almost this isolation, which what we know is perpetuates the panic disorder to continue.
So interesting. Talk about your dad and your relationship with your dad. Your dad's a lineman.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I kind of got into mental health and lines because of Dad. I'll be honest, I don't think I would have gotten into it if it wasn't for him. So my dad is, he's my ride or die. He's my best friend. And the reason being is, growing up, he was a lineman. And so growing up, small town, and kind of worked up. I think there was 4 of them when they first started.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then it was like a small utility, and then kind of to a different utility. And then Hydro One in Ontario bought them out. And then he was a part of Hydro One. And that's where he retired out of. So growing up, he was a lineman. So he was, regular days, what I remember. And then he was gone a lot of the times for big storms. So the ice storm back in Ontario, that was early 90s. So I was, that one I remember. So he was there, and then he wasn't there, but he was always present. Just looking back at, he was gone and he'd come home, and then he'd hang out with us, jumping on the trampoline, spending time with me. So I think we've always had a close bond. So, when he was not working, it was him and I fishing or, just spending time together. My mom worked a lot too. So when it was our time together, he was really, really present. And so kind of growing up, he went from lineman to superintendent. And I might skip a few spots because looking back, I was like, oh my God, there's so many different avenues back then, sure. Especially when they were buying and all that stuff. So he was superintendent, and I would say I was probably in high school when he kind of took that position, maybe a little bit earlier, but that's when I remember it the most. And so I'll never forget, his demeanor changed. And when I say his demeanor changed, I mean he wasn't as present. And that was a big one. He was home more. He wasn't gone because he wasn't on storms, but he wasn't as present. And, as time went on, we kind of, I would say, especially because I was a teen, you're going through I was going through my own stuff. And he, was working as a superintendent, dealing with the guys, dealing with, office staff. And I was really sick at the time, so I was in treatment about an hour away. And every day I'll never forget this, every day he would finish work, he would drive straight from work all the way to the hospital because I was on bed rest, and he would come, and I would call him every name in the book, just be so angry at him for me being there. And he would say goodnight and then do it all over again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's sit on this topic of being a kid first and having a father that's a lineman. And you mentioned the importance of being present. Mm-hmm. That's something that I didn't really develop, that presence. Like I was telling you, I had 2 sons early, like mid-20s, and then waited 8-10 years before I had a daughter. And I've been way more present with my daughter than I ever was with my boys. And it's something I had to learn and grow as a human being as well. But for anybody out there that wants to skip that step of waiting 10 years to realize that, how important was that? Like, talk about some of those things that he did that you now say, my dad's like my ride or die.
Yeah.
Like that, as a father of a girl, that just makes me almost want to cry. Like, that's what I want to achieve. My daughter to say that. So like, what are those things that guys can do?
Yeah. So with my dad, as a kid, right, he was really present in the sense of like, he would come home and he would make time to spend time with us. So whatever that be, if it's, going to the park literally down the road and hitting golf balls, or, every Saturday we would go out on the boat with myself, my brother, and him. And then we'd have our naps on the boat and he'd continue fishing. Things like that, even just when we're talking little, just being present, building, we wanted to build forts with the couch pillows. He did exactly that, getting down on all 4 knees, letting us, ride on his back when we were kids. Like, those memories I remember very, very well, those early recollections. Fast forward to being a tween or a teen, like, those are hard years. Those are hard years because they're coming into themselves, especially girls too. That's a hard time. Yeah. And, and then add mental health issues to the mix. Looking back, he was not only present, but he didn't try to fix. And not only as a dad, but as a male, and especially in line work, you want to fix. You want to fix so bad. Yeah. Oh, she's struggling. Here, what do I do? And I remember him saying, there's no manual for this, especially mental health issues. Mm-hmm. There's no manual to fix this. And that was huge for me. He didn't try to fix it. He tried to understand. And he sat with me through the darkness, is what I always say. I don't need you to pull me out of the darkness. I need you to sit with me until I'm ready to get up and see the light. That's the
most important thing. That's he was just there.
He was there.
Yeah. And present.
He was there and present. Even to this day, he's there. Like, I mean, retirement's changed him a little bit. I think his mind's only on golf and hockey right now. But if I'm having a rough day and I just need to vent, he's not only letting me vent, but he's asking questions. Like, he's validating, listening, and not trying to fix things. I'm somebody who needs to talk things through. And so I call him my sounding board. So when I was doing my research, he was like, the reason for my research was on caretakers and eating disorders at the time. And I always said he was my sounding board. I could just go back and forth with him for hours, and it might have taken me hours to figure out what was going on for me, especially during my darkest times. And he would sit there, whether it could be up to 3-4 hours of sitting on the couch, just me breaking down, talking about things, and just till I felt okay. And he never, ever rushed that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Love that. What was the moment? So you become a therapist. Yeah. So actually, back up before that, what was the moment you actually decided to pursue that route?
Yeah. So funny enough, I went to college, scratch that. I was not even graduating high school, and I pray they never pull all my degrees back, but I didn't even finish high school. Okay. I got into college. I applied, they accepted me. Didn't even finish all my courses to graduate from high school. So I just wanted to get out. So I go to Toronto. I'm in this program, not even finished high school. But nobody said anything. So you
just kept going.
I just kept going. And I was doing really good at it. I was in child and youth care. And so I would be doing college work while finishing these books, those high school books, to get my credits. So funny to look back on. Every time I applied for a program, like whether it was my degree or my master's, so I'm like, I really hope they don't look back on this. But now it's
done.
It's done. I own my own business. They can't take that from me.
Yeah.
So, I did that. And then I went into child and youth counseling or child and youth care in BC. And my dad was a big one for that. I was like, I got into the program and I was terrified to go. And he's like, this is one of those moments, Hayley, I'll never forget it. We were on the swing outside in the backyard. And he was like, this is one of those moments you need to put your big girl pants on and you need to take the risk. The worst thing that can happen is you don't like it and you come home. That's all that'll happen. And I've lived by that. I take a risk. What's the worst that's going to happen? Just doesn't work out. And so he always uses that with me. He's like, is this a moment you got to put your big girl pants on? I'm like, yeah, I think so. I think I got to put them on.
I love this about your dad, how, he can sit with you in silence and just be there and be present.
Yeah.
And then in the moments where he knows that it means the world, he comes in with the advice.
Yeah. That tough love.
And then you're going to listen too, right? Like, cause it's the moment he actually says something and is like, And that's that, secure attachment that that he helped create for me. And so kind of going back to your question, I knew I wanted to do therapy. I didn't know how to get there. I really struggled to figure out like what programs to take, how to get there. And it wasn't until I kind of had to look into different avenues. Now, I would say, especially since COVID, they've made it more concrete, which is amazing for a lot of people that are wanting to be a therapist. And so I just knew I was like, okay, there's so many avenues, right? There's like children and youth type work. There's, mental health, or there's behavioral work, things like that. And so I knew I wanted the mental health route. I definitely did a lot of different practicums, worked a lot of different jobs, from working in gang youth all the way to working at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto in the eating disorder program. So I've seen all different routes, and I kind of slowly started to build my niche of what I wanted to work with, which is that one-to-one work. How? Like, I get the lineman side with your father, but how do you land on specializing almost in working with linemen?
Yeah, because that's an interesting niche, right? And so it was I love research. I think there's some really interesting stuff we can learn. I had to do my thesis and my master's, and then I was doing research with a supervisor through the University of British Columbia for other research. And I loved how complex it was, taking something so big and bringing it down to something concrete. And so through that, my dad was there for that. He was my sounding board. I was bouncing ideas, and he was a big part of it, was because he was a caregiver, and that was what my research was on at the time, was the impact of caring for somebody with an eating disorder. And so after I finished that, I kind of was just working, doing normal stuff. And my dad was always somebody who would confide in me, because he was working really closely with the linemen, and they would come in with issues. And because he has experience with me, he did such good work. And I also had to remind him, don't let them abuse your compassion.
Sure. Because
he is somebody who will go all out to be there for you. And so I remember talking to him, and I just looked up mental health and lines, and I was like, there is not much out there for you guys. Did you know that? And I was like, this is kind of the stats that we have so far. And then I started to question, like, what do you guys have at Hydro One for, like, mental health? We got the EFAP, employment and family, like, assisted programs, and they get a little bit of benefits for this. I'm like, but you have like a nurse come in for like, you know, during COVID, like, what do you have for mental health? And there was not much there. And I was like, I'm like, I want to.
Your entrepreneur brain
kind of
kicks
like,
on a little bit too.
Yeah, it
like,
kicked on, and I was
there's
like,
opportunity here.
There's opportunity. I was like, and there's not much there.
Yeah.
And I think working in gang youth helped me kind of be okay working in that, because it's, you know, it's definitely a field, especially with trades and linemen and men, like coming in as this woman who's going to talk about mental health, and they, you know, don't know much about me. Like you have to have some thick skin.
That's interesting that you like relate it to like your work with gang help.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Because they're going to come in.
But it makes sense. There's a lot of outside of like, okay, we're good people. We're not doing illegal stuff.
Yeah.
Like to an extent. That's crazy though.
Yeah. And so I knew I had to have thick skin, because people are going to have biases towards it, right? Like as a therapist, you come in willingly, right? Unless you're, you know, court ordered or mandated. But if you're just coming in, paying for therapy, like you're willing to be there to some extent. Whereas talking about mental health to these line guys as a part of their health and safety, like that's a whole nother can of worms. And so I did a speaking engagement at my dad's work at the time. I did it for free. And I knew my dad was nervous, because like, not only am I going in, he knows these guys, he knows how they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, that whole bit. But he's also, I think, in some ways he was nervous because it's like his little girl's coming in. And there's like that protective factor. Yeah. And I was like, you know, Dad, I can do this. Like, you need to give me some credit here. And so in that moment, I really enjoyed speaking, and I had great conversations with some of the guys. And I'll be honest, I love when people come in and tell me like they don't believe in mental health and they're challenging me. I'm like, I love it. I'm not there to debate per se, but I want to understand why you think the way you think and what it is that you don't believe in or that you disagree in, so that maybe I can give you some information and you can do what you will with it.
Why do you think there is a massive stigma around mental health in the trades and in line work?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Ryan. I think a big reason is societal stigma that comes down to, you know, whether it's, you know, what they call quote unquote toxic masculinity in the trade itself. So if we're looking at line guys, like I'm sure you can attest to it, like the mindset of just get on with it, grow some thick skin.
Yeah, 100%.
Get over it. You don't talk about those things, or you're going to deal with the consequence of, you know, actually bullying. Like that is what it is. I think guys have a hard time when I'm like, that's bullying. And they're like, what? Like, we're just, you know, joking around and this. And it's like, yeah, but intention versus impact. What's your intention and what's the impact it has? And so I think right there comes this belief that mental health isn't real right away. When they come into the room and they're coming in to listen to me talk about mental health and mental illness, and the first thing I hear is, I don't believe in it.
Talk about the differences between mental health and mental illness.
Yeah.
And what's your process of breaking through at the beginning to reach people?
Yeah. So I love that question, or even that statement people give. I always have one guy, and then he's like the one I'm focusing on. I'm like, I'm going to break you. I'm going to make you understand. Mental health, I often say, like, do you have dental health? Do you go to the dentist? Do you brush your teeth? Do you floss? Do you check your teeth out and see, oh, that one's kind of loose. Oh, that one, like, you know, this one hurts back here. Okay. Physical health. Do you go to the doctor? Do you get physicals? Do you have blood pressure? Yeah. Okay. Mental health is the same as those types of health. It's just the health of your mind and brain. Maybe we have to call it something different. That could be it. So mental health is just the health of the mind, is what I like to say it is, as basic as possible. Mental health issues is my second step. That's where we're seeing mental health struggles. So low mood, maybe irritability, difficulty getting up in the morning. That might be some of those anxious tendencies or depressive tendencies that we see. Things like that. Mental illness is that one step deeper that requires a set of symptoms that typically you would see as a diagnosis that really impacts one's life to the point where like you're seeing the impact, whether it be at work, at home, things like that. So I try to break it into tiers for people to understand it a bit better. Because I think oftentimes we see mental health and mental illness being kind of crisscrossed, and then people don't understand what it actually is.
So what is the process then that you walk people through to help them understand that? Like if you're just fresh in the room right now with a group of 20 guys in front of you, like how do you break through that? Like how do you start that combo?
Yeah. So oftentimes it starts with, I go around, ask them name. I ask them their kind of the rose and thorn of the year. And the reason I ask that is kind of like what's been a high of the year and what's been a low of the year.
Interesting.
I usually start that conversation. And the reason being is I'll start it because I will open the room to even having my thorn be something quite deep. So that it creates a safe space to talk about these things. I'll have people talk about, they had a baby this year, all the way to their thorn being the generator broke, the heater broke, like they got a big bill and it's stressful. And then I ask them, what's your understanding of mental health and mental illness? And when I get that one person that says, I don't believe in mental health. Okay. You don't believe in mental health or you don't believe in mental illness? That's kind of my first question. And I come at it from a very curious standpoint because if they're getting them mixed up, then I can help separate the two. And typically that's what I see is I don't believe in mental health. And what's so funny about that is oftentimes they're the one that's married to somebody in the mental health field, which is a whole nother can of worms.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Do you find that people give you their positive, but they're reluctant to give you the negative or their thorn. Do you find that people generally give you the bad thing that's happened? And do you believe that that's the bad thing when they do, or are they just kind of coming up with something?
I believe sometimes it is their bad thing. I work from a very somatic-based standpoint, right? So that's very much that body-based experience. And so you can kind of see what might be coming up. I've been very fortunate that some of the companies that I've spoken with, even their office staff, are so open to going deep because you get what you put in those moments. Some of the thorns, I'm going, okay, is that what you're coming up with? And then that's my job for you. You don't have to externally talk about it, but I want you to sit with it a little bit and think about, okay, what's actually kind of been a hard one going on this year?
I'm going to read this question because I want to get the whole thing, but I think this ties into that. Men are not incentivized to open up emotionally or be emotionally expressive. Men are rewarded for their ability to hold their shit together and not open up emotionally. And I think that is very much prevalent in the trades. It's like, because it's primarily a male-dominated industry, men in general, and I know I'm generalizing, we're told to hold our shit together. We're rewarded for holding our shit together, being strong, just bury it, no matter what it is, no matter what trauma you want to throw on top of that. Shoulders are big. We can take the weight of it until we can't. We're just not incentivized to open up emotionally. What's your thoughts on that?
Oof, that is even that quote is so loaded because I think there's so many avenues that we could look at within that quote. One being is that men are not, and I want to preface this that, yes, I'm going to generalize a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And so kind of give some grace that way. Men do not typically express their emotions. They might say, oh, that pissed me off.
Yeah.
Or, what was that like losing your dad?
Until it's anger. Sad. They'll express anger.
Anger's okay. Anger's allowed. Anything else is not okay. And so not only is men are typically not expressive. They've never been allowed to express. And then we can go one step further. They've never been taught to express. And that's just the baseline. If I even go another step deeper below the surface, they weren't ever taught to express, but they never were taught to intellectualize and understand what they're feeling. Not even express, but just kind of process internally of like, what is coming up for me right now?
Now you're going woo-woo for most men. And I hope I didn't lose half of you, but like, listen to this. Yeah.
And so look back on your life. Mm-hmm. Were you, as a kid, were you emotional? Did you express emotions? Okay, let's say you didn't. Did you understand what was going on inside? A lot of the times you don't understand what's going inside. And that's the work I do with clients is many times, especially line guys, they'll come in and they'll be very, very cognitive, right? You have to be rational mind in your line of work. So it's really hard. You're not connected to your emotions. And I'm not saying that from like a woo-woo standpoint, but more so, okay, anger. I often say anger, there's fear or there's sadness. And so it's one thing to state it. It's another to express it within yourself and understand it yourself. It's another to express it to somebody and for somebody to hold space for you. And so if we look at emotions or even like low mood, if we even go one step deeper into like depressive symptoms, oftentimes we're cognitively trying to externalize it and go, okay, well, I got this going on, and kind of having to find the external factor as to why something's happening, because it's not okay to sit with the fact that maybe this is something going on for me.
What is the point of understanding the why? Like, what is the point of going deeper? Because like you said, some people might not even realize that there are these layers to this onion, but there are. But what's the point of going deeper? Why would you want to do that? Because you can figure out then what the issues are and deal with them, right? Yeah.
You can figure out what's going on. And then, someone might come back and say, okay, well, I don't want to. I like how I've been. Wouldn't you want to know more about who you are as a person? The more you learn about yourself, the more you create and gather, whether it's emotional intelligence and maturity. Not only is this good for you, but I know a lot of the guys have kids. How are you going to teach them about emotions and not only feeling emotions, but regulating them? Often we see a lot of dysregulation with men and emotions, which turns into whether it be drinking, substance use, working way too many hours, anger, frustration within their relationships. And I use this kind of activity when I work with linemen. I give them a piece of paper and I say, I want you to think about moments in your life where you kind of got hurt emotionally. Okay. And we all have a breakup, a divorce, things like that. I want you to crinkle your paper. Okay. Think young. Okay. Then I want you to pull it out. Okay. Think of another one. Crinkle it back. Okay. Then lay it out. When we learn to understand our emotions and not only understand them, express them and regulate, we create a safe space for healing to happen and we can smooth out that paper. And that's life, right? It's continuous. There's never going to be a time where we don't get impacted in some way. If we look at that and we look at our kids, for example, we want to protect them. But more importantly, we want to teach them how to take moments where their paper gets crinkled and teach them how to uncrinkle them and strive and kind of thrive more so. And oftentimes when we don't look at our emotions, we're just surviving. How many linemen are just surviving, going to work, working crazy hours, come home, whether it's make dinner, make sure all the chores are done, go to bed, continue that cycle.
There were days I did a lot of work in copper and gold mines in central BC, Canada. Lots of open pit mining, right? At the time. And these were not like primo places to go to work, especially, a lot of other people in those jobs got to drive around in the haul trucks or sit in the big shovels. And and or be, in the buildings, like outside of the weather pretty much, right? But we were building power lines in open pit mining. And if you've ever done this, just think of massive, giant holes in the ground that we would constantly build power lines around these holes. But then like 2-3 weeks later, you'd have to tear it all down and move it 500 yards back because the pit keeps expanding, right? It's open pit. It keeps expanding. They keep chasing the copper seams. Anyway, it's on the top of a mountain, worst weather conditions. It's like snowing in August, windy all the time, freezing cold. You're walking on giant boulders all day long. So it's uneven footing all day, every day. Anyway, painting the picture of pure exhaustion, 12 to 14 hours a day, and you're going home. And I know like a lot of linemen aren't working in copper and gold mines, but just like scale that to whatever your thing is. It's still tough to deal with Houston traffic every day, or, inner city, just dealing with the people around it, trying to deal with structures and replace structures in an inner city environment. You're freaking exhausted. So that I just remember that point about, I was always exhausted. And then you come home and you're expected that you worked this, job in a corporate office, and you just sat at a desk and you're full of energy when you get home now and you get to live the rest. It wasn't the case. Like, I remember just like getting home and it was like complete exhaustion. And I had a screaming kid and a partner that didn't want to deal with the screaming kid anymore. And just like, it's tough, man. It's tough. And this is what these guys deal with. And I just think it ruins a lot of lives, because then they turn to those, it manifests in different ways. That's the crinkling paper. And then it manifests in alcohol abuse, drug abuse, become workaholics because they just don't want to go home. So they stay at work and they hang around the shop and they bullshit with the mechanic for an extra couple of hours because they don't want to go home. They just go home, eat dinner, and go to bed and go do it again. That's no life to live.
No. And so when we look at that, right, I often explain it, and forgive me, Ryan, I use a lot of analogies here and metaphors. And so I call it kind of like your cup. And oftentimes they say, I look at it as, is your cup overflowing? So oftentimes when I do trainings on mental health and speaking engagements, I'll give everybody a cup and I'm like, okay, I want you to pour water into this cup for how much it takes up of your time of work. A lot of the times it gets to 3/4 real fast. Okay. Do you have a partner? Do you have a wife? Do you have a girlfriend? That's a relationship. Those come with ebbs and flows. Put some water in there. Do you have kids? Put some water in there. Okay. Those are just the bare minimum pieces. You're already full. Yeah. And then I always hear, oh, okay, mine's at the top. I'm like, that sucks. Keep going. You're going to have to clean up some water after this. Okay. Then I want you to look at more negative impacts. Do you exercise? Move your body even? No? Okay. Put some water in there. How's your sleep? Absolute shit. Okay. Pour some water in there. Okay. Are you eating decent? Are you getting enough meals in? Let's say three meals, 2 to 3 snacks. No. Okay. Put some more water in. You're overflowing. Do you have any hobbies? Yeah. Do you engage in those hobbies in the past 3 months? No. So it's kind of the perfect storm. And then you're coming home and like you said, here's the kid, here's all this, throw some food in your mouth and go to sleep. There's no time to decompress. Or when you are decompressing, you're distracting with a dopamine hit of whether it's TikTok, Instagram, sitting on your phone scrolling.
This is I think one of the biggest things that you talked about, a trifecta. Like, so I want to get in, like, how important is sleep and movement? And what was the third one that you, sleep, movement,
and food.
And food.
Yeah.
Talk about those three and how they come into effect.
Oh, I'll bring it back to my work. And so as a therapist, just working with clients, oftentimes would say I'll put my work into two categories if I was doing individual work. One is people come in, they want to explore themselves more. They've got issues going on, but they really, really want to understand themselves and the world around them and kind of really do that deep, deep work, which I absolutely love. And then we have those individuals who come in, I see it with men a lot, where shit's finally hit the fan. Their wife is not happy. You know, they're not sleeping well. They're having like physical health issues or just noticing things. That's when they come in and they're desperate. That's where it's, okay, I need to fix this. And typically I'll see it, okay, like there's definitely some anxious tendencies or there's maybe an undiagnosed anxiety disorder or depression. Even, let's say trauma even, especially with line guys because of seeing things on scene. And I call this triage. And the reason being is we got to create kind of that baseline. We got to create that nice thick layer before we can do the work. And that is around sleep. What's your sleep schedule like? Oh, you know, I get home and I don't fall asleep till about 12:31. I'm sleeping with my kiddo because they're not sleeping good. So I'm getting kicked all night. Then I wake up around 2, 3 because I can't fall back asleep. And then I sit there and then my alarm goes off at 6 and I'm barely able to get going. Okay. Not the greatest sleep schedule. Yeah. Your cortisol is definitely high is what I hear. And then on top of that, you're getting up and just going again. Okay. So sleep's not good. Then we've got, I always ask, what's movement looking like? Oh, I haven't went to the gym in, years. Okay. I don't even say the gym. What about going for a walk?
Yeah.
Get a, just like
That's what I go to work for.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on my feet all day.
I don't need to go to the gym. I go to work.
Yeah. But that's not true movement. That's not intentional movement. Yeah. And so I look at that. Then I look at food. What does your relationship with food look like? Are you eating like crap? Oftentimes, especially in the winter months or storms, they, especially in Ontario, I think they get so much for lunchtime and they're getting extravagant meals. And we're not talking, things that are going to fuel them. We're talking, they'll go for the French fries. They'll have the Pepsi. They'll have, all these things that are not, I'll remind you that I do work in eating disorders. So I'm very, very cautious of how I talk about this, but they're not choosing foods that are going to fuel themselves for the day. I'm not talking having a salad, but I'm saying
just whole foods.
Just whole foods that are going to...
nutrient-dense whole foods.
Yeah, that are going to fill you and provide you not only protein and energy, but that's not going to create that crash. Or they don't eat all day. They're drinking coffee all day. I see that all the time. These beautiful Yetis are filled up, and when they get about 3/4 of the way down, fill it up again. Yeah. And then you come home and then you eat a big meal. You're not even present to eat that meal. You're just eating to put food in your stomach. And then you go to bed and do it all over again. That is what I call the perfect storm.
The big thing, a couple of these on this, I'm going to talk to you guys out there. The store stop. So there's the morning store stop. It's the gas station stop, right? Yeah. And it's literally whatever they can get. The tacos from the gas station, the whatever snacks, the energy drinks that you guys consume. I see it all over there. Yeah. It's not going to help with any of this. And then on the sleep side of things, it's what a lot of men don't realize, in particular, like testosterone's created while you sleep. Mm-hmm. So if you have shitty sleep, you don't create the testosterone that you need to create to get you motivated to go work out at the gym or just do life as a man, especially as you start to age. Your T levels are going to go down anyway. Never mind if you're not sleeping, if you're not exercising, if you're not eating well. It is a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of just being in a shit mood and bad mental health.
Yeah, it's I often say, and I think that's why, especially with some men when I go and talk, is that they have this belief that, okay, mental health isn't real. And I'm like, but it's all connected to physical health as well. And how you use your body in its best abilities. Yeah. And if that's not okay, then I can almost guarantee that your mental health's not going to be okay as well.
Yeah. Chris Williamson had this quote that I'd sent to you a while ago, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it describes the idea of man points, where men feel they need to achieve certain status or certain achievements, or, you know, in strength or physical capabilities or something like that, and earn enough man points in order to become vulnerable. An example was Mr. Olympia, 6-time Mr. Olympia, Chris Bumstead, can cry on television because he's earned enough man points that he can be vulnerable and cry. And I really loved when Chris brought that up, because I think it's often the people that haven't earned the so-called man points that are the ones that need to be vulnerable the most. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, you know, I see it all the time in my office, especially if I'm working with men. And maybe this is a bias of mine, but as a woman, right, we often talk about wanting men to be, you know, softer and be, you know, connected to their emotions. And we want all these things. But when they're put in front of us, we either are really uncomfortable with it and don't know how to respond to it, or we get the ick because it's not manly enough. And so when we look at earning those opportunities, it really comes down to, okay, so he's breaking down, he's tearing up. Okay, well, you know, he works a crazy job and he's been the provider for our family, and he's, you know, a man's man, like he does it all. And it looks like he's had enough. He's hitting his breaking point. Why is it that somebody has to hit their breaking point in order to be given validation, to have emotions, or to soften? And so when we look at individuals, particularly men, who maybe haven't earned those man points of whatever that is societally, they get kind of swept under the rug. And then it becomes this thing, and I'll even kind of, this might be a weird concept to think about, but even looking at it as an eating disorder, right? Like when I talked about the doctor and being like, okay, well, your weight's okay. In my mind, it was like, well, I'm not sick enough to be physically sick enough to be taken seriously. So therefore I need to get sicker.
Wow.
That same mentality of, okay,
I never thought of that before.
I'm not manly enough. I haven't won my man points, quote unquote, to be deemed okay.
So true. That is so true.
To show my emotions, or to express my emotions, or to say, hey, I'm not doing great.
There is this hard, crusty toughness, especially in the line trade. And that's why it plays so heavily into this, where you feel like men feel like they have to earn the right to be emotional.
Yeah.
Or it's not that we feel like we don't even need to be like that. Like we will just tough it out. We'll get there by just toughing it out. And it sooner or later catches up with you. It's that cup of water that you keep pouring. I heard this from a firefighter as well. He's actually going to be on the show again tomorrow. James Gearing spent 15 years as a paramedic and firefighter in Florida. And that's what it was like he uses that cup analogy. Just like you keep pouring into it. It's a bucket. Everybody's bucket is a different size though. You don't know how big, but you don't know how big your size is. Yep. But every trauma, everything you see, you know, it's the same with the fire service. He comes from that very hardened background as well. Like just deal with it. Just, you know, push it down, tough it out. You know, all of our forefathers saw the same shit. They just dealt with it until until that person takes their life, or something bad happens, or they lose themselves into drugs, alcohol, sex, something else to cope and ruin their families, ruin their lives, blah, blah, blah. But I just think it's so true. I don't know why we accept that, and we don't have to accept that. So how does somebody begin the process of dealing with these things while they're smaller, before they're like this massive overflowing bucket?
Yeah.
And now it's a severe trauma. how do you begin to deal with these? How do you coach somebody into beginning to deal with these things?
So I think first and foremost, if someone's coming in, and I'll get into why I bring this up, is that I'll have somebody come in who's in kind of crisis mode, right? Like shit's finally hit the fan for them. And they'll come in and we'll do what I call the triage, right? We'll get them, kind of work on sleep, food, movement, kind of social hobbies, kind of just the baseline. And then they go, okay, I'm good. And they're done. And a couple of years ago, I would probably take that as like, oh, okay. I've come to learn, and not to say I'm a psychic therapist or anything, but I'm like, I'll see you in a few months.
Yeah.
Because we haven't dealt with it. We never did deal with it.
You've just seen it now. You've seen it come back.
And we created a nice baseline, and then you're gone. You're not actually dealing with your bucket that's been sitting on the back burner that you decided to turn on high on the, on the stove. And so
they just deal with the thing that's immediately in front of them, like that one reason that brought them there.
Yeah, we'll deal with the impact of like, oh, I'm noticing like I'm having like chest issues, I can't sleep, and my wife said I should try therapy. Or my doctor said I should go to counseling. That's typically what I see come in. And so we're not dealing with the issue. And so the reason I bring that up is keep that in mind, right? So when we're taking steps, okay, what is the steps that we need to take to help kind of coach or support somebody to kind of work on their mental health or kind of work on those pieces? Well, first is that triage piece, but then do not stop there. Do not think that because you're asleep and that you've moved your body and that you're eating good and you're doing your hobbies, that you're good now. Because there's a reason you came in.
Yeah.
Or there's a reason that you're struggling with your mental health. And maybe those are some that's connected for sure, hands down. But that's not the be all end all. And especially when I look at trauma, Dr. Van de Kolk talks really highly about, the body keeps the score. And I use that quote a lot, especially with line guys, because that's the only way they kind of understand is that the body keeps the score. If you don't deal with this stuff, your body's going to hold on to it. And that's not even from a woo-woo standpoint. That's science. If we look at these older generation in lines, and they're always my favorite because I either have the young guy who doesn't believe in mental health, and then I got the old guy that thinks it's stupid and he's retiring in 2 years. So he's already out the door. But he's the one that's drinking 7 cups of, a Tim Hortons Canadian coffee all day and not sleeping good, and he's worried on the back burner but not talking about retirement because he's got nothing at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing I talked with my dad about was, what are you going to do once retirement hits? Because a lot of times line guys, their life is lines. And so kind of coming back to your question, Ryan, is working on those 3 things at first is important. Then let's look at kind of your behaviors. Okay, so we're kind of working on that. What's your behaviors? I'm irritable. Sleep's not good. Poor concentration. Okay, you can do your job fine, but are you able to sit and spend quality time with your partner and actively listen, actively engage, not just, but validating 100%. And having like in-depth conversations? That's quality time. Are you able to do any of those things? No. Okay. That's where we need to work on.
It's like, I love the physical fitness analogy. It's like you wouldn't, okay, now I'm fit and I'll just stop. Cold turkey it. Yeah. You wouldn't, like, why would you do the same with your brain and your mind as well? Like, okay, I dealt with the thing. I'm fit. I'm mentally fit now. I'm good. It's like it's something I've learned. It's a constant thing, right? And then what do you say to people that, because this is where I was coming from all the time as well. I grew up in a great household, really did not have any, like what you would classify as major childhood trauma or anything like that. No real abuse in any way, it was fine. Great childhood, come from a great background, loving family, all the things. I don't need therapy. What do I need therapy for? Until one day something sneaks up all of a sudden and you're like, boom, your bucket's full. So just explain a little bit that it doesn't necessarily have to be like this. You didn't have to see somebody your partner burn alive on the line for it to be traumatic and for you to have things to deal with.
I often, when we talk about trauma is not a one size fits all, right? So something you might see or experience may impact you differently than for myself. It's the same as you were talking about, everybody's bucket's a different size. Oftentimes people come when there's crisis. And that's when it gets hard, right? Because we want to deal with the crisis, but what got you there? And so I think when we look at, and I'll focus in on trauma for a sec, because I don't think we talk about it enough, and especially with line work, because a lot of the men that I work with, they've experienced something. They were there. And then, I think you and I chatted about this before, they get a debrief.
Yeah.
Maybe, let's say, the day of.
Debrief from the supervisor or the foreman.
Or something who has,
all of the same symptoms as you.
All the same, two people with trauma trying to help each other, right? And then on top of that, somebody who might be, and I'll put my bias out there, having an older generation mindset of mental health and get on with it, and that resilience. I hear that all the time from older guys. It's like, they're not resilient. And it's like, well, you haven't created the environment to be resilient. What does resilience mean? It doesn't mean to get on with something. It means to heal and grow and thrive through it and have supports. And so if we look at trauma from a lineman perspective, you guys are dealing with, whatever the case may be. And then you have what I call kind of the bleed through, which is, you've dealt with it, you've experienced it firsthand. Then you come back to, the utility, and you're being impacted by it. And then everybody around you is being impacted by it. And I'm sure, Ryan, you could probably have experiences of working with somebody who's went through something or is going through something, and you're with them all day. That bleeds on you too.
It does in a lot of different ways too, because they're part of your crew. It's a brotherhood.
Yep. And
it's tough when you don't possess the ability to really help. And I think a lot of people just, they do two things. They try to help too much, giving from a place that it comes from a good place, but they don't have the tools and they're not equipped with the ability to give, or they retract and they just let that person be because they're like, it's their stuff. I don't want to get in the way. This is work, and I separate work from home life. And I get that. But also in the same sense, if you ask that person if they would rather go deal with their stuff, they say 9 times out of 10, I'd rather go to work. It helps me get my mind off of it. Yeah. I'll just deal with it by going to work. But it doesn't help that you're at work because your head's not fully in work.
No.
It's not.
You're not dealing with it. You're just distracting yourself.
Yeah.
And I always say, you can distract yourself. Everybody has coping mechanisms to deal with their stuff. Whether I have somebody come in who's like, I go to the gym, and I often hear this one, and that's a whole nother can of worms, is, the gym is my therapy.
Yeah.
And I don't spend money on therapy. I go to the gym and that's my therapy. And I'm like, different thing, but
good start.
Good start. We'll start there. You're doing your
You're one of the 3.
Yeah. And so, people have coping strategies to deal with their stuff, whether they're healthy or not healthy. So if I have a client come in and they're struggling and, they are moving their body and they'll, use ice packs to distress instead of engaging in cutting, for example. And I'm a therapist, so I talk about all these different things. Yeah. So not to scare anybody, but those are 2 strategies. They're 2 coping mechanisms. As a therapist, I don't look at them as being good nor bad. It got you through something. So whether it's substance, whether it's working like crazy, whether it's self-harm, whatever the case may be, it worked for the time being. So I'll give you that. You found something. Now, is it the best one? No, because you're not dealing with it. You're not sitting with your shit and working through it. And that's what I see the most of is I just go to work. because it's a distraction, but you're going to come back at the end of the day and it's all going to surface. It's like the boiling pot of water on the back of the stove. It will overflow when you least expect it. And I always say the body does keep the score. And right, like if you're stressed out, struggling, you typically get a cold or get sick, your immune system weakens. Okay, you get sick, you recover, and then you go back at it all over again. Eventually, the bigger things are going to show up. And that's when we can't backtrack as easy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So no matter what, no matter if it's big things or somewhat little things, it's really, therapy is great for everyone.
Therapy is great for everybody. As a therapist, I go to therapy and I'm very open about that. I think if you're seeing a therapist and they go to therapy, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's like massage therapy. You probably go see a masseuse if you're a massage therapist.
And I always say I'm a human being first, therapist second. And I've had my own stuff and I'm very open about it. And I've been going to therapy at a very young age and I still go. I've been working in mental health and also have used mental health supports for over 15, 16 years. And I'm a strong advocate for it, for myself and for others. And so do I struggle and go to therapy for the same things that I went for when I was in crisis? No.
Because you dealt with them.
Because I dealt with them, but I'm still learning about them, why I am the way I am and why I coped the way I did. And if you look at panic disorder or anxiety, right, I've learned about it and I've learned to cope with it. But I also still learn, okay, new challenges are going to come up, right? So, when you're in your 20s versus your 30s, 40s, once you had kids, marriage, parents getting older, getting sick, like those are different moments. And I often call it like, okay, you go to therapy, you're navigating your stuff in crisis, and then you're finally at a part where you're kind of stable. And there's going to be ebbs and flows. And so call it a tune-up, if you will. Checking in and be like, how are you doing? Okay, what's going on there? And sometimes that's what therapy is a tune-up, checking in on where you are, where you've been, how things are going, and what do you maybe need to hone in on right now in your life. And we need to all be challenged.
I heard a stat, and don't quote me, so it's a stat, but if where there's smoke, there's fire. If it's any truth to this, it's staggering that more men die at work in America every year than the total number of men that died in the Iraq War. Every year. And I don't know the number that is take their own life versus, it's got to be staggering, because even myself, I know 3 people that have taken their lives that were linemen. And that's just me, scale that. I'm tired of hearing it, to be honest. I shouldn't say like I'm tired of hearing it. That's bad to say, but something's got to be done about this at scale, because it's like every day. And if it's not every day, it's every week. I'm getting a DM or a text or a call of somebody close to me. So it's 2 steps away, their friend, their coworker, that's either taken his own life or it's an accident or something happened, but it's a mental health accident because it's a substance abuse thing that took them, or not focusing at work because of, like if you went back to the root, it's them not dealing with the things they need to deal with in their head, and it caused X outcome. But that was a staggering that it's nobody talks about that at all.
We don't talk enough about the mental illnesses that occur in trades and particularly in lines. And we don't talk enough about suicide and suicide attempts. And so, because I think there's so much stigma there too. And when I hear you say, Ryan, I'm tired of it, what I hear is I'm tired of that being the story that's connected to line work, that is a part of our work because something's not being done. Yeah. I'm tired of that being what I hear. And so when we look at whether it's suicide, whether it's, an accident, we talk about in like, especially line work, I hear it all the time, especially from management, is like, there's no such thing. An accident can be prevented. So why is there not prevention being placed in lines for mental health, mental illness, suicide? And so you see it all the time, right? In terms of whether it's substance use. And I know that that's a tricky one. And you and I chatted about that, is like, it gets people going, especially in line work. And oftentimes I see it, right? Whether it's alcohol, whether it's, cocaine, marijuana use, I'll put those three out there. I see it a lot. And okay, but I use it only after work. Okay, but it's the next day. And that's, how many of us without substance, how many of us go to work and don't even remember how we got there? Or you're working on the lines or with tools, and it's just such a common pattern, right? That neuroplasticity has been created and we're not even aware anymore.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking about accidents at work, and I love safety, and I love especially the way the people at Quanta are dealing with safety, and they're really taking it next level. It's amazing. But I think, again, if everything is an onion and you peel the next layer, we love to, in safety, address the exact problem that happened. He was electrocuted, or he fell. Okay, so he wasn't clipped in. Let's go create barriers to stop that fall from happening again, or that electrocution from happening again. But what's the layer deeper? They came to work not mentally prepared. And you'll never know, because you can never ask them again. Were they in the right state of mind?
Yeah.
They must not have been, or else they wouldn't have made that choice. You wouldn't have made the choice to not clip in and fall, or you wouldn't have made that choice to touch that thing that and you've been trained not to touch.
Yes, for years you've been trained.
Yeah, and I get that there is just all-out accidents sometimes. Yeah. It was a mistake and they were in the right frame of mind, but what is that percentage of people that are coming to work not in the right frame of mind, and why is more not being done about that?
And when we look at it, I think you made a great point, is okay, from a safety point of view, we look back at what we could have done, what we need to do from a physical standpoint. And that's that next kind of layer on the onion of like, okay, what do we do to support these men and women to be ready and fit for work? And that was a big part of my dad's work, was health and safety, being fit for duty. And it's like, okay, how do you know they're fit for duty though, if you don't talk to them and don't know their story and don't know what they're going through? And that's that next step I often talk about with management, is get to know your guys and don't use it against them. And put your biases.
Sit with them, be present.
Yes.
Be there.
Validation. I just had a speaking engagement where I got to know the guys, and, I could feel, and I don't know if I think I talked with you about this, Ryan, a while ago, was I walked in the room and I could feel the tension and just this negative energy that was in the room. And I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. And so when I spoke with them, as soon as management left, it was a different energy. And I was like, okay. There's something there. And I am always willing to take risks. And I always say, I'm going to take a risk here. I could be completely off. But I noticed there's something going on. Yeah, because they don't listen to us. Okay. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be heard? That's what I'm trying to understand between you. And I want to be heard. I might not have the right answer. Like, you might not be right, but I want what I'm saying to be validated. And it could be as simple as just talking about lines, and then it goes even deeper. You want to have kind of like that open door policy. I want management specifically, and if we even look at like Quanta, you want to have that space where they know they can go there, be heard, be validated, and be supported, and not be rushed to fix it to the next point. A lot of us want to fix, and I get that, especially men. You guys want to fix. And I think that was a big one for my dad, was learning he couldn't fix what was going on for me. And he took that working with guys who were struggling with their mental health and just sitting with them.
I love that you said this because it's actually a topic that's coming up more in these circles as well. Corporate understands that they need to get to the field more, and they know it. They're talking about it. They know it's something they have to do because it's effective when they get there. Mm-hmm. So I love that you said that you have this interaction with the field once management leaves, quote unquote corporate, leaves the room. You ask the guys, what is it like? What's the bear? What's wrong?
Yeah.
And that's their input. They're not listening to us.
Yeah.
So if you're from corporate and you're wondering what to say to these guys in the field when you get there, you don't have to say anything. You have to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I've really adapted with my work, whether it's with linemen or any other trade. When I do speaking engagements, is we've started to remove corporate management from the room. Because even though corporate will engage and talk about mental health and be open and be vulnerable, which I love, mm-hmm. It's still not safe enough. You can't just be vulnerable that one time, even though the past year since I've gotten there, you haven't created that space. It's not going to happen for those guys.
Yeah.
They've got their guard up for a reason. They've got a wall up that's protecting them. Is it serving them? In some ways, yes, but in others, no. And so let's remove you guys and let's sit with the guys and see what's going on. Yeah. And once I open that space, it just flows. And it's almost like a big group counseling in a way, because they're talking about all these things and they're giving you facts and examples. And then my job is to kind of get down to the root. Okay, so what I'm hearing is you don't feel validated. Yeah. Okay, there it is. It's not about this particular job or this about benefits. It's actually that you don't feel heard. Mm-hmm. You can't be vulnerable and feel heard.
This is cool that, like, it's a brotherhood, and it's cool that there's an aspect of it that can be done in a group setting. Yeah. Because so many times we all think that we're the only ones, we're the lone wolf, we're the only ones going through this stuff that we're going through. Yeah. When in fact that there's probably a group of you, and if you spend enough time together like linemen do, there's a group of you going through 80% of the same shit that you could deal with all together in a group. Yeah. And you don't have to deal with it in the bar. That's where you usually deal with it. You can deal with it in a setting like this and actually work through it. And then you can go deal with that stuff that's a little more personal, on your own. But yeah, that's interesting how you can get through probably 80% of it in a group setting.
You can connect in a group setting so much. And you have to, I think, create that space to do so. And in addition to that, you have to, and I think that's my job, is navigating the different personalities. And you're always going to have the odd one or two or a group that are just not for it. But if I can get that 80% to work together, I'm doing my job.
Yeah. How important is positive self-talk and like self-talk in general? Speak about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that though, Ryan, is that there's this, I don't know if you've heard, but there's this kind of thing about toxic positivity now. Everything's becoming, we're throwing toxic on everything, eh?
Sprinkle of toxic on everything.
And so the mindset of, just be positive. We know it's not as simple as that. I get that. However, if we go from even just a cognitive behavioral therapeutic lens, we know that negative thoughts and negative talk, we start to create those assumptions, and it's almost like we're thickening them. We're really solidifying them. So if you wake up every day and go, today's going to be shit, it's going to be another crappy day, I don't know, Brian's going to be the same as he always is, you're already kind of creating that perfect storm to be a shit day. And if we go one step further of how we talk to ourselves, we call that kind of those irrational thoughts. Like, what evidence do we have for that to support that negative thought? Well, if we keep doing it, it's just like going to the gym. If you start walking and you want to get to 5K running, if you slowly work at it, you will get there, hands down. It's the same as negative talk and the same as positive. If you keep kind of creating that and perpetuating that negative self-talk, you're just solidifying it more and more.
It's like when you see a car that you want, and all of a sudden all you see is that car all the time. Same sort of thing. It's just the thing you're thinking about the most.
Yeah.
Like you become the things you're thinking about.
And so that's where I go, pick one thing that's been on your mind lately that might have a negative connotation to it. Sit with it for a sec. Let's look at, I'm not moving my body enough, or, my relationship sucks. I'm really not happy in my relationship. Okay. What's going on there? What do you have? What evidence supports that thought, and what evidence doesn't support that thought? And I hear oftentimes we'll get to the point where we can kind of separate the two, and then I'll hear, but, and they want to go back to the negative. And I go, hold on. This is my job to challenge you and stop that for a sec. What do we have? Sit with that evidence for a sec. The actual positives, the stuff that's going good for you. Why do you want to keep going back? Even though we've got that there, why do you want to keep going to the other side? Because you've really solidified it for a long time, and new is uncomfortable. It's hard to sit on the other side of things.
When you say sit with yourself, I think a lot of people don't understand what that is now, especially since this is the newest generation of constant dopamine hits, and there's constant distractions or things to distract yourself with. Yeah. What does it mean to develop a practice of just sitting with yourself? I saw Jordan Peterson say something about, and this kind of ties in, because he said when he needs to write a new book or, whatever he's going to teach on some subject, he will literally lock himself in his office with no distractions. And his family used to know, like, you cannot come bug me, because I could be 6 hours into one thought, 6 hours into that. And if you interrupt me, I could lose it and therefore lose the book I'm writing or whatever. Like, it's gone. That's the extreme. But if we scale that down to just working through our shit, is that what you mean by sitting with yourself? Like, no distractions. You don't need to meditate or anything like that, but you just need to sit in your own thoughts and process with your own mind.
I think people, and it could be the way that we word it, I think people assume that it means meditation. And I'll be honest, I'm a therapist. I don't meditate. I don't have time. Let's scratch that. I probably do have time. Do I want to? Not really. Yeah. But what I mean with that is you don't have to go to that extreme and meditate or lock yourself in your office for 6 hours with no distractions. What I mean is take a moment to check in with yourself. How many times a day, or how many of us actually come home from work and we go on our phone and we scroll and scroll and scroll? We're not actually sitting there decompressing. We're just distracting. We're getting that dopamine hit. And so that could be as simple as, you come home, think about the shower. You're having a shower, you got no distractions, unless you're bringing your phone in there, which that's a whole nother can of worms. But sit with yourself in the shower and just let your brain do its thing. Yeah. Let it think about things. How are you doing today? How was today?
Something that, and I know that a lot of people are going to relate with this, you sit in your driveway, in your truck when you get home, and you'll sit there. I encourage people to do that, but don't do it on your phone.
Yes.
Just leave your phone in the cup holder and just sit in the driveway for 10, 20 minutes. And if you have to tell your partner that you were on the phone when you go in because they see you in the driveway but just take a second to decompress. It helps.
It does.
And that's a lot of people do that, but yeah.
Take a moment for you. You're allow yourself to decompress. And like you said, Ryan, put the phone away. And even bringing that into the relationship, right? Like I often say, like, take time for you. Sit with yourself. You know, if you say to your partner, yeah, I was in the truck and I need to decompress. That's also teaching others that it's okay. And if you have kids, yeah, that's your moment. Take time to sit with you. No distractions, just with yourself. How often are we not with ourselves? We really are a disconnected society.
100%. What other things, working with linemen, what other things have you noticed? Anything specifically related to us and mental health, like linemen and mental health, that you could point out?
I think there's negatives and positives. And so maybe I'll start with the negatives. Mental health and lines, I often call it, you know, the things we can't see, the dangers we can't see. Working on lines, we know that research has shown that because of, you know, the electromagnetic fields, you have a higher susceptibility to depression already.
Really?
That's just that. And every time I tell the guys that, they go, what the hell did I get in this job for? Well, you like what you do.
Yeah.
So you have a higher risk for depression already. You work crazy hours. Okay, so your sleep's probably already going to be impacted. So you guys have the perfect storm. You're at a higher risk for, you know, physical health conditions because of the environments you're in. So like type 2 diabetes, you know, blood pressure, things like that. Those are just a part of it. Does that mean it's going to happen? We can change that. It doesn't have to be, well, that's just how it is. I hear that all the time. Well, it's just how it is because it's my job. No, it doesn't have to be. So those are those physical health conditions, the science that we have that's right there. Then we have, I see a lot of, is substance use and abuse, whether that is alcohol, drugs, sex, working like crazy hours, things like that. I see a lot of it. It's a very, very taboo topic, I think, because they're nervous of what that means. But I see a lot of it, and that's a way to cope.
What's the first step to dealing with that?
I always say, if you can label it, if you can name it, you can tame it. But that's being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And being open to the fact that maybe you got a problem.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, is not only vulnerability and naming it, but admitting to yourself that, hey, maybe what I'm doing is not in the best for myself. Even though your life's going good, you're not spending all your money. Like, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that rock bottom. Like, you could not be spending all your money on substance or alcohol. You could have a family and all those things. But maybe admitting to yourself there's other things you could be doing. It doesn't have to be rock bottom in order for it to maybe be something that's not great for you. Yeah. And so admitting it to yourself is the hardest part, right? Admitting, like, yeah, maybe I got to change some things up, because that's being vulnerable, and vulnerability is linked to emotions.
Yeah.
And emotions are not okay in men, is what we've kind of talked about.
That's definitely something, like, I've been going through that over the last year for sure. And it's something that I had to just come to this realization that it's not showing up as the best version of myself. And I want to be the best version of myself. I want to adapt a growth mindset. So if I'm drinking, I probably am not in the best mindset because I'm numbing that. And then you're just in a bit of a fog too. So it's not like full-blown alcoholic where I'm just using it as some sort of comfort, or even just like at a point, a habit. It's like, I need a glass of wine tonight, whatever. And there is a definite fog, and you can fight this with me all you want. It just means you haven't admitted it to yourself yet. Mm-hmm. But there's a fog that comes with drinking. And it is so nice to put your feet on the ground in the morning and go, I'm not hungover today. Yeah. I'm not even just hungover. I'm not in a fog today. Yeah. I am with a clear mind. And when you get into that space, it is freaking awesome. and you can do it.
It brings so much clarity when you're not drinking. And I think there's two sides to it. One is that, you know, when you don't drink, I think society's getting better at this, but I think especially in trades, it's not where it's at, is this mindset that, oh, you're not drinking. Why?
Yeah.
Why aren't you drinking? And it's like, 'cause I'm not. Why can't that be okay? And I have a lot of it in my practice where it's like, okay, I did dry January and I want to keep going and I feel good, but what do I say to people? And I could easily say, just from, you know, just as where I'm at with my own relationship with alcohol, is say you're not drinking, so be it. But for some people, they need to have a true reason that's deemed appropriate to not be drinking. And that's that confidence within yourself to kind of put yourself first and not give an excuse or have to have a reason for why you're doing what you're doing. And when we look at alcohol, like you said, Ryan, like brain fog is huge. When I work with people who have anxiety, I'm like, okay, what's your relationship like with alcohol? And I've come to learn in my practice, when I ask that question, if someone says occasional, I have to clarify even more, because I've asked that question where it's like, I'm an occasional drinker. I'm like, okay, so how often? Oh, every day. I'm like, okay, I gotta be more specific then. And so with that in and of itself, I go, okay, so when you have a drink, 1, 2 even, do you notice that you feel a little low a day later, 2 days later? Or do you find your anxiety gets really bad? Yeah. Okay. Keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change it. I want you to just be aware. My job's not to change it for you. My job is to help you find awareness. And then they go, oh, yeah. Yeah, day 2. Oof, I'm feeling it.
You speak about awareness, and I started wearing a Whoop device over a year ago now. I've worn it every day for probably 400 days. And it's changed my life. It's not like the thing. So I'm not going to say like it's solely responsible for all of the good direction I've gone in the last year, but it's helped me so much in so many little ways. People say, well, how did it help you? You know, looking for like that big thing. And it's like, it's not like it did one thing for me. It helped me make one small decision every day towards being healthier. Yeah. And one of those things was it revealed the effects of alcohol, because one drink shows up in my recovery score the next day. And for somebody that's competitive and always wants like a green recovery or whatever, to know that you're going in the right direction, especially when you decided to go the right direction, to see a setback even once, that's a whole day. It wrecked my score. But it pinpointed the effects of even one drink. Or on the food side of things, it's shown me the effects of eating too late in the day. And if I go to bed within 3 hours of eating, of when I ate, so if I ate late at 9, I go to bed at 10, like I'm digesting food all night and I'll have a shit recovery score and I'll feel brain fog the next day. I'll feel shitty. And it's revealed that. So many cool things. So if anybody's thinking like there's a million devices out there now, whether it's Whoop or Oura Ring or whatever, I encourage you to get something to track your metrics and start tracking it, because it'll reveal things to you that you didn't know affected you.
And that even comes down, I'll even add to that, is it comes down to what we call SMART goals, right? Like specific, measurable, like attainable goals, and tracking them, measuring them. And so if you don't have the necessities to get, you know, whether it's the Oura Ring or whatever the case may be, track it. Track it however, write it in a book, put it up on your wall. Seeing it every single day is so important. And so, and I always like to add to that is I get a lot of clients who, you know, want to get like a device or a gadget and this is going to fix. I'm like, you got to do the work though.
Oh yeah.
You got to do this little device ain't going to do it for you. Yeah. It's a great tool to track, but you also have to do the work that it can't track. Yeah.
I always used to like think that tracking macros was just, I don't got time for this. But like you can use MyFitnessPal. And it took me a couple of years to get on to doing it. But like what it revealed again in overeating and how much I was overeating, I always used to think, well, I'm eating healthy. I'm eating whole foods. I've made the switch already where I'm eating healthy foods, but I'm still eating too much of it. I'm eating way too much food. That's why you're not losing what you need to lose. You're not feeling the way you need to feel. Anyway, I'm a big fan now of like tracking stuff. And
it helps to visually see it. And that's kind of that piece, I think, that you and I chatted about before was, you know, when we do things for ourselves, we often look for accomplishment and measurement, and we look for it externally from people, right? So if we look at the working out, or whether it's, you know, working out, like physical changes or even mental changes, we often look for the external factor to tell us. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're on the right track. And that's that confidence piece, and that kind of what we were talking about, negative self-talk. Having something for yourself that measures for you, that's all that matters. And if that's what you need to do it, versus waiting for that external 3 months from now to tell you to keep going.
Curious on another topic. Loneliness and isolation is something that isn't talked about enough in the trades at all. I went through a phase of a few years in line work where I would spend upwards of 300 days a year on the road. And I know you're around people every day, you're around your coworkers, but you go to work for your 12 hours, then you go back to your camper or your hotel room or your Airbnb, and you're in isolation. And I've heard people say like, well, just FaceTime your family. And FaceTime is great tool. I don't like talking on the phone. I don't really enjoy FaceTime. I would much rather be in person. I'm grateful for that tech and that it exists.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. But it's still different. You still shut it off and it's just you in this bloody room. Yeah, talk to that a little bit.
Oh, you know, there's this concept about being dependent on people, emotionally dependent. And in society, I think we've created this mindset of like, it's not okay. But as human beings, we're innately created to connect, just like other mammals in life. And so depending on somebody for connection isn't a bad thing. It actually creates that secure attachment over time. And so when we look at loneliness and isolation, it could be from a physical standpoint, right? In the sense of, like, I have an office. I like seeing people in person. I like to be seeing my clients on the couch, blankets, pillows, you know, we've got snacks and water and tea, and we're just connecting. Yes, obviously, you know, FaceTime, all those things are great to keep connected, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
That does not equate to connection. And I would even go one step deeper, is like loneliness and isolation can even go into feeling isolated from connecting with people. So I bring it back to my dad in working, you know, in lines, and when he was doing more management and he was at the office dealing with people all day, and then driving an hour, just over an hour, having to park, go into a hospital and sit with me, listening to me, you know, scream and yell and cry and freak out on him, running off the ward, having, you know, security call. Like, that was his life for months, and he did it. But nobody knew that's what he was going through. And I'll never forget, you know, speaking about this, and, you know, my parents know that I'm an open book. Sometimes I think they have a hard time. It's like, oh my God, don't tell people that. And I'm like, it's fine. Because that creates vulnerability for others to share. And so I'll never forget when I shared this, speaking with the lineman. My dad was there, and his old boss was there. And he came in just to watch because I was down. And he didn't know that that's what my dad was going through. And he remembered that time. And it nearly broke him, of like, holy shit, that's what you were going through?
Interesting.
So we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We really don't. If you think you know, you don't. And so that was isolating and lonely for my dad. And then in and of that, you know, he's having his experience, my mom's having hers. So there's isolation in that of itself. And so it kind of comes back even to your experience, Ryan, of like, nobody nobody has the same experience as you. Nobody's experiencing isolation or loneliness in the same way. They could be, but it could be different for them in other ways. Mm-hmm. Some people might not even have somebody to FaceTime.
Facts. Yeah, that's a great reminder too. That's a really great reminder. And then never mind if you're dealing with stuff in your relationship, but you're on the road, mm-hmm. and it's I've seen all of that, and it's way more common than people would like to acknowledge that it is in this trade. It's really no wonder that it's got bad divorce rates, mm-hmm. All of it, bad rates. Try to change that. It's hard though. It's such a hard, because like this sort of work needs to get done, and there's no other way to do it when you're, driving 4 hours into the desert from Albuquerque, New Mexico to work on a transmission line. It's just pick the spot, West Texas, nowhere to stay. You're in a small town in West Texas for 6 months, and there is nothing to do but that one restaurant that has a bar after work. There's nothing to do.
And so that's where I would even go deeper into saying relational. That's a big one, especially in trades, especially in lines, is like you said, divorce rates, relationship issues, not understanding each other's side. It's well, I've been on the road, I've been gone, I've been doing this. And then your partner's yeah, but I've been alone and missing you. And then you're expected to come home and just be on or pick up where you left off. And so I don't think that's talked about enough, about how difficult not only lines is for relationships, but also your own mental health. I think there's just so much there. And then when you put the 2 and 2 together, that's just another perfect storm.
The other aspect that I'm reluctant to talk about, but I'm going to say it anyway, is the completely corrupt family court system.
Oof.
And we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of that, but this is something that is in the back of our minds because it's something I've gone through, especially from the male side.
Oh, yes.
There is no chance that you're going to go up against the mother and win any sort of custody with the job you've chosen and the lifestyle that they know that you have and that you've created. And you're just held to maintaining that now. So not only have you lost your kids, and especially if they're under the age of 10, they don't have a device that you can get in contact with them. And then if you have to go through your ex to try to arrange a FaceTime, that is very, very, very real. So that dives even further into the isolation and loneliness, is you have people you'd love to talk to, but you can't talk to them.
You can't. And then you're, like you said, you're going through your ex and they have their own emotional, call it, whether it's dysregulation or feelings and thoughts towards you, which, we'd be lying if we say it doesn't impact how they parent or allow you to connect with your kid, hands down. And then on top of that, I've worked with so many guys and their mental health is so negatively impacted because they're going through a divorce or a separation, and they bring in good money and, they have to literally be mindful of how much overtime, because that goes to them and they're just sinking. And this life that they've built, this hard work that they've done, is being swept from underneath them. And they're starting from bottom. They can't even afford a 1-bedroom. And they just left a 4-bedroom house.
You legit don't want to make more because it means you just pay more.
Yeah.
So it's why do I go work harder? So it's you come face to face with this choice. Do I have a bunch of more free time now because I don't have my kids anymore and I'm alone by myself. So why don't I work? Right? But you don't almost want to dive into that because you're all I'm going to do is make all this extra money just to give it away.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. And I could go on rabbit hole after rabbit hole of this, but I don't want to dive too deep into that yet. But this to be said, it all leads to a not very stable mental health condition
No.
that a lot of linemen are faced with.
Yeah.
A lot. And
it comes off as, I think the problem is it comes off as external in the sense of, okay, they're going through divorce, you know, like this is happening. And I've had my dad, you know, like he's confiding in me of like, this is going on. And I'm like, how's his mental health? Because you're talking about all the external parts, kind of like you and I've chatted about before, was, you know, you might be going through something and I would see it as depression, yet you go to a doctor and they're like, okay, well, you got this going on, this, and okay, so it's externalized. And we're not looking at the mental health part. So it's like, we're always talking about, oh, how's that divorce stuff going? Oh, she's, you know, doing this, or he's doing this, or whatever the case may be. But your mental health is just struggling so much. That isolation, your whole life changing, not being able to confide in anybody, not even just about whether divorce or the kids, but about how it actually feels for you.
Yep.
We always talk about what, you know, this sucks, like I can't see my kids, or, you know, we talk about it from that point of view, but we don't talk about the surface, right? That's where it's like, okay, how's that impacting you?
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
Yeah. It's horrible. It's horrible. And you go through it alone because, again, you're not allowed to bring it up. You're not allowed to talk about it. It's especially if like you chose it. Yeah. It's like you chose it. You wanted it, you deal with it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not a human.
You're not a human.
Like at all. I get to just, and it's a major one. That is a major one.
And I think that's something, Ryan, we could dive so deep into because of the layers relationships and line work has in and of itself, I think is like such a big topic. And then adding like kids into that mix. And it's funny, if I'm working with linemen or I'm speaking with them and we're talking about mental health and illness and traumas and, you know, getting into the science, and especially the ones that are just sitting there and just taking it in, but not really giving much, it's when I get into, and I always give a snip about children and youth, mental health and relationships, it's like the floodgates open. And I would love to spend more time talking about that because I think it's not talked about enough of how relationships are impacted from both ends, but especially for line guys. And on top of that, if they're the one to be struggling with the relationship.
Well, what else do you have to say about that?
I have to say that like we look at the impact we often hear, and women are going to hate me if they listen to this, about, you know, how the women are being impacted of like, okay, their partner's not home, they're taking care of the kids, or they don't have kids, or they're alone, all this stuff. But what about the guys who they're not with you either? Their brain is focused on the work and the work only. They don't have the time or the capabilities to think about anything else. And then they come home and they have to be on. They don't even get a minute to decompress. And then we get mad because they're not there. It's not the same as my work, but I also equate it to that in the sense of I come home and I'm exhausted. And we're talking not just mental, but emotional. I'm holding a lot of people's stuff in a day. Mm-hmm. And I'm not there. I need a few hours to decompress, and I can't be there. And so that's where I talk about that 80-20 rule. Sometimes you're going to take on 80% of the relationship. And that doesn't mean for a few hours. That could be for a week or two.
Yeah.
And that is those conversations you have to have in a relationship, communication. And sometimes that means holding the relationship afloat until your partner can be a part of that for whatever the reason is.
I love that you said that because it's so true. I'm just thinking back to like the average work day of a lineman. One day is not the same as the next.
No.
One day you have your head up in the 3-phase and it's tight and there's electricity everywhere. There's the threat of everything everywhere. Heavy traffic, electricity, heights, like name the thing that can get you and we deal with it. And sometimes on a daily, you'll deal with all of those things in the same day, most days. But then there's the days where you don't. Yeah. And that goes the other direction then. Like the days that are heavy and intense mentally and physically, come home. If your partner understands that that's been the kind of day that you've had and can, you know, accept that and take up 80% for you, as long as you can give it back again the next day when it is better. I love that. I love that. That's a great way to look at it.
And then I would challenge you as the person coming home from that, they have to understand and accept it, but they also need to know about it. So it's your job to vocalize that. Relationships, and that's a whole nother topic, is like we assume so much in our relationships. Oh my goodness, so many assumptions. And so we need to not assume that our partners know what we did in a day, and they'll never understand, right? They're not in our shoes. They're not doing that work. Yeah. But they need to have an idea of, you know, today I'm having a really hard day. I'm at 20%. And maybe your partner also was taking care of the kids and they had a really hard day and they're at 20%. Okay. So we're both at 20. We both can't hold each other. We just need to be kind right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Being okay with the fact that maybe neither one of us want to put work into the relationship for today, because our batteries are low. We got to recharge. And being okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good point. If you both can be mature enough to understand that and just go, okay, it's just going to be the day that it is. I don't hold anything against you. Don't hold anything against me. Nothing. Let's just go through this for the day or the week. Just don't let it turn into months, I guess.
Yeah.
How much do you talk about creating a support system? Is that anything that you talk about? How important is a good support system, and how do you start like building a good support system?
So I think the first thing I do, especially, and I think this ties into support systems, is when I go in, I talk about mental health. I do this kind of activity with the guys, and remember, working with linemen, I have to use activities because I swear most of them can't sit still for too long. And so I'll bring in rice and I'll bring in, you know, jelly beans, and I give them so much and I make them mix it up, and then I put it into groups. Okay, your family, your friends. What hobbies do you have? Hockey. Okay, I go fishing. I have fishing buddies. Okay, those gummies that are in the rice, those are the people with mental health issues or mental illness. And I'm like, they're always going to be in your groups. And so I start there because it's a nice way for me to see how many groups they can make. And that's a big eye opener for me, because I go, ooh, that person only has 2. Okay, who's that? And I go from a curious lens. Who is that? Okay, that's your family. Okay, and that's work. Okay. Nobody else? No. Okay. We got to change that. And so that gives me kind of the foundation of what I'm working with. And oftentimes I go, okay, who would you go to? I'm not talking about when you're physically sick and shit's hit the fan. I'm not talking about your doctor. They can be a part of your support system, but who do you go to? Who's your people? Okay, my wife. Okay, that's your person. Who else? Your kids are not. That's not their job, is to hold space for you. And I push that immensely. Okay, I have my wife. I have my family. Okay, what about your mother-in-law, father-in-law? Are they somebody you would turn to? No? Okay, that's fine. Who do you feel safe enough? Or is it somebody who you've never turned to? It's more from a nervous standpoint to turn to, but you think you could. That's where I typically start. Then I try to remind everybody, and this is something that's taken me years to kind of understand, is your friends and your peers or people in your life, they're not all going to be the same. We have some friends that we can go out, have a drink, shoot the shit with, and they're a great time, but so help me God, I will never turn to you when I'm struggling. It's just that person. And that's okay. It's okay that they wouldn't be your person for that. And so that's what I call a support system. Do I have people I can turn to? Yes. Do I have people I can be creative with? Yes. Do I have people that I can engage in my hobbies with that are slow and intentional hobbies? Yes. Do I have people that I need a good time just to have fun and let loose? Yep, I got that person. It's okay not to have people that are all the same.
I love that. I've never thought of it that way. I've never thought of like, I always thought your support system had to be everything, like somebody that could be everything all at once.
It's the same as a relationship. We have this mindset that our person has to be everything. They don't. They won't be. Mm-hmm. They can't be. Your partner's not going to be the person you turn to for everything. And being okay with that is one thing, but them being okay with it is another. And so your support system they don't all have to be the same. Sometimes they bring different things to the table, but knowing that yourself is, okay, I'm going through this right now. This is the person that would be the best for me for this reason.
That's so cool. It's so cool that that's why important to sit with yourself and figure out these little pieces and start building your little system of people that, I love that. Huh. That's really cool. I have this group chat that kind of like fell together, and it's just been an awesome little group of 6 dudes that, you know, most of us have only met each other in person maybe twice. And we talk about all kinds of shit all day, every day. And I know that they're there in any moment if I need them. Yeah. And that's also like really, really important to like try to find someone or a group of people that.
That's huge, because we oftentimes feel like this person has to be everything, or these people have to be everything, and they don't. And then even a step further is we have these people, and it's okay if it's not reciprocated, if you're not their person. Being okay with that as well. And so, you know, if we look at creativity, like I love reading. I'm a book nerd through and through. I used to go to a book club, a book reading club. I thought that was the silliest thing, but I met some really cool people that are super, you know, just intellectual, and like allowed me to expand like the things I read and all those pieces. And that's my creative group. And then I've got, you know, my best friend that's the person, if I'm struggling, or maybe I'm sitting with shame or, you know, guilt or discomfort, whatever it is, I'm going to go to them. And then I got my girlfriends who are like, you are not the person I would turn to, but you are sure as hell a fun time. And that's maybe what I need today.
I love that.
Finding your people.
It's also not I love that you're not putting that on them too, so that I find people often get disappointed in some people and they figure like, oh, should I just cut this person out of my life because they're not showing up for me how I need them to show up for me right now? It's like, well, wait a minute. Did they show up for you in other ways? And what are those ways that they do show up for you? And maybe that's all that they're in their life for, is to talk about trash TV or something.
And that's okay.
It. They don't have to talk about, you know, your kids and this and that. Like,
maybe that's not their job or what they're meant to be in your life for, and being okay with that. And in addition to that, I think we also don't give people enough credit that maybe they could be there, but we're scared to give them that opportunity because that's vulnerability, and vulnerability is terrifying for us.
It's awesome. It's been a great convo. Hour and a half so far. Give me a couple of actionable steps that linemen can take right now to prioritize their mental health.
Oof. One, this is the heavy one. I'd be lying because I'm a therapist. Go to therapy. Yeah. I always ask, have you been to couples therapy? And they're always so shameful about it. And I'm like, why?
Such a bad stigma. I get it. Like, it's been something I've had negative connotations towards before.
See, I love it.
But
you know what? I've been to couples therapy, and I was nervous. You gotta remember, I'm a therapist. So going in to see a therapist for that, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm the worst person in the world. Like, my head's spinning.
Right.
And I also do couples work or relationship work. So I'm like trying to turn that mindset off of like, oh God, I know what they're doing. I know what like theory they're pulling from and all this stuff. And I remember leaving and being like, man, I texted my best friend. And I was like, you got to do couples. Why? Was it good? I'm like, if this doesn't work out, I have gotten so much out of it for me that I'm good.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, and that's not the only reason, but the reason I say that is you'll learn about yourself so much from a relational standpoint, in the sense of how you show up in relationships and why you respond the way you do as an individual, not just couples wise, but like as a human being.
Sure.
Love it. It also depends on the therapist that you get. And so that's a big one. I say therapy, and even if it's once a month, I have clients, especially men, that come in, they're like, I just want to learn kind of more about myself and be more in tune. I don't really need therapy. Like, I don't have anything going on, but I kind of want to just do that work. I'm like, I love it. You come once a month. Let's do some deep rooted work and kind of figure out who you are, what's going on for you, your goals. If you're close to retirement, go to career counseling. That's huge. You know how many people put their lives into their career and then they've gotten rid of all their hobbies, because they're too busy. Their partner maybe isn't ready to retire. So just like my mom and dad, my mom still works. My dad's retired. Okay, how are you going to use your time? I've had many men, even in trades, come in being like, I'm having... I was
going to say, Linemen, are you listening?
Yeah, like I have anxiety, like I'm retiring soon. Okay, first 2 weeks is going to feel like a vacation. After that, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So that's where you need to figure out your hobbies. Maybe not working right away into a part-time job, but look at your hobbies. How can I incorporate those? Going to the gym. Okay, get back into movement somehow. Maybe walking every day. That's your thing. Setting a routine, a schedule is huge. Even just figuring out how you want to feel needed and wanted. That was a big one for my dad, feeling needed and wanted, because you're needed in lines. And then when that's gone, okay,
yeah,
what do I do? I've had, clients in the past that struggled with, my kids don't need me anymore. They're married and have kids and I'm retiring, and like, what do I do? I'm not needed. I'm depressed because I don't feel needed. So I often say for mental health, you need to have hobbies outside of work. What are they? I don't care if it's reading, if it's gardening. I know those sound silly, but some guys love, doing that work. Stuff around the house. Sometimes, women say, oh, that's not a hobby for them, but they like tinkering. You men love tinkering, and that's okay. So finding things like that. If you love to fish but haven't, get back into it. Make time. You do have time.
Yeah.
You're just not prioritizing it.
Yeah.
That would be a big one. Next is sleep. Are you sleeping enough? Get rid of that phone before bed. Stop distracting yourself with the phone. I know we say that all the time in society, but we don't really follow through.
Not even close.
Not even close. Put it away. You don't need to watch Netflix. Grab a book. Read. You never have. You don't like reading. How do you know? You never tried it.
Yeah.
Listen to an audiobook or a podcast. Sit there with your headphones in and just listen.
There's these great books that I just found out about too on Audible. I think they call them immersive books.
Yeah.
Where they're full on like acted.
Yes.
Like they're like sound design, acting, like voice, different characters.
So good.
Yeah.
I just got into that.
Oh yeah, cool.
And it's my first time ever because I didn't like audiobooks.
I've never tried them yet, but I've heard like one guy said just one AirPod on the ear that's above, a sleep mask, an immersive audiobook, and then you can set the timer to shut off after half an hour so you don't go.
Brian, you got to get it. It's like, I always say it's like theater in my head.
Yeah.
They've got different characters and like sounds like the wind. And I'm like, I am watching a movie in my head. So and then you're also using your brain to be creative and create new neuroplasticity through doing that because you're being imaginative. How many of us used to be so imaginative as kids and then we lose it as adults?
Yeah. Yeah. Love that.
So using that time. Next is creating that support system and maybe sit down and write it out. Sometimes writing out, okay, who's, I have a lot of acquaintances. I always say that. I know a lot of people, but I don't consider them my people. Who are they? Yeah.
I've actually been giving that advice lately anyway, just on doing an audit on the people in your life, whether and how they are showing up for you, whether they're a negative draw on your life or whether they're a positive addition to your life, and actually doing an audit on it. It sounds shitty, but it's not.
It's a part of
life. You need to start separating yourself from those negative people and bringing more of those positive people in. And it sucks because some of those negative people might be your mom, or
they might be.
It's not you, Mom, don't worry. But some of them might be somebody very close, and you have to like completely cut ties, or start separating yourself with them because it's not healthy.
And when you say separate, I'll even add to that, Ryan, in the sense of sometimes, let's say it is your mom, sometimes being okay with that's all that they can be for you and that's all they bring to the table, and that they're not the person you can turn to for emotional support because they themselves haven't done the work.
Sure.
And the minute we start to be okay with that and accept that is we can start healing. And so looking at our people in our lives going, okay, maybe they're not the person I could turn to, and that's okay. But oftentimes we try to turn to them and try in hopes of like, oh, it'll change because we're trying to yearn for something we're not going to get. and being okay with that. And that even could be your partner with, they don't understand work entirely just because they don't have the capacity to understand, and that sucks, but finding someone who does.
Yeah.
And that might be, you know, somebody you work with, of like, hey, you want to go for a walk, or go do a round of golf and just shoot the shit about how things have been.
100%. Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the convo today. It's super valuable.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope you guys got some value out of that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to draw your awareness to a couple of other things. So we make these podcasts, yes, but it's not the only thing that we put out as far as content. Our social medias are full of valuable cuts from the podcast itself, as well as just a bunch of other educational stuff and entertainment. So go follow us at Powerline Podcast on all social media platforms. And then also YouTube. I don't think that a lot of you are aware of this, but we don't just load these podcasts onto YouTube. We also make vlogs, which are super educational, entertaining, great place to direct people to learn about the industry, learn about the trade, or just learn about what's going on within either Quanta or the Powerline industry in general. So hit up our YouTube channel. Again, it's at Powerline Podcast. You can catch those vlogs on there. We also load a bunch of other extra content in video form. We try to up the quality every time we do this. We try to up that quality. So hit up the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subbed to all those platforms. Appreciate you guys. Hope to see you again soon. We'll see you again soon. Peace.